So now we're going to be talking about stage R with adults. And so this is kind of one of those sections that you just need to put your seatbelt on because there's a lot of information to go over in terms of the scenarios in which we want to score stage R. So first, again, let's talk about definitions. Let's introduce you to some concepts. Rapid eye movement, we've talked about that, being at less than a half a second. You're going to have a low chin tone, and so the technical definition of a low chin tone is baseline that is no higher than any other stage of sleep and usually is the lowest of the entire recording. Okay, so sawtooth waves are trains of sharply contoured or triangular, often serrated 2 to 6 hertz waves. They're maximal, I mean that they're most common over the central region, so you're going to see them in your C derivations. You can have transient muscle activity, and those are short, irregular bursts of EMG that are less than 0.25, so not even half a second, less than even a quarter of a second, and then it's superimposed on top of the low EMG chin tone, and then may also be seen in the EEG or the EOG derivations, indicating that there's activity of the cranial nerve innervated, the facial scalp muscles. Okay, so those are the definitions. Now we're talking about when do we apply the rules for scoring stage R. So scoring stage R, okay, it has to include all of the following criteria. Number one, low amplitude mixed frequency EEG activity without K complexes or spindles. So again, LAMF with Ks and 2s would be stage 2, right? So we don't really want to see the Ks or the spindles present. You should see a low chin tone, okay, for the majority of the epoch. And then you're going to see a low chin tone concurrent with REM. So this is something that you really have to remember, is that when you see the rapid eye movements occur, it has to be concurrent with the chin tone being dropped, okay, not separate. And then REMs at any position within the epoch qualifies it as the epoch. So that's the scoring stage R. Now, how do we score studies if there is no rapid eye movements associated with that particular epoch? Okay, so you have the low amplitude mixed frequency without K complexes. Okay, that's a must. And then the chin tone is low, as definite as a stage R. And most importantly, too, there is no intervening arousal. And then slow eye movements following an arousal or stage wakes are absent. So scenario number one is, how do I score stage R in general? And we went through each of those sections there. Then it was, how do I score stage R if there is no rapid eye movement to help confirm the stage of sleep? And that's when it goes to, you cannot have Ks or spindles. You got to have a low chin tone. You cannot have an arousal. And then if you do in fact have an arousal, then their slow eye movements cannot be present. And then continue stage R if the majority of the epoch contains a segment that meets R. So even if you see rapid eye movements at the end of on the last half of the epoch, it still qualifies the entire epoch as long as no other contiguous rules or anything like that apply. And then of course stage R always takes precedence over stage 2. So let's talk about, when do we stop scoring stage R? Again, the scoring manual is really good about telling us when to begin staging and when do we continue, and then how do we stop. So how do we end stage R? So when one or more of the following occurs. Number one is you have a transition to stage wake or stage 3. Okay. Another option is if there's an increase in the chin EMG tone above that of stage R and stage 1 criteria is met, which typically includes slow eye movements. Arousal followed by a low amplitude mixed frequency and slow eye movements would be a reason to stop. So again, arousal followed by slow eye movements. And then you would continue stage R if there is no slow eye movements or increase in chin tone. So again, it goes back to this idea that slow eye movements need to be a critical piece of your tool belt when you're scoring sleep studies. Okay. Now, major body movements followed by slow eye movements and low amplitude mixed frequency without the presence of K complex or spindles is when you can stop as well. So if you have a major body movement and just after that you have slow eye movements, then you can also stop scoring stage R. And so score the following epic as 1, but keep as stage R if no slow eye movements are present. Again, major body movement does not necessarily have to push the patient out of stage R. It really depends on whether or not slow eye movements were present after the body movement. And then, of course, one or more non-arousals associated K complexes or sleep spindles are present in the first half of the epic in the absence of REM. So if you see Ks and sleep spindles and there is no concurrent rapid eye movement, that would suggest that they are maintaining the state of REM, then you would also stop scoring stage R as well. So another scenario in scoring stage R is when you have basically a low chin tone, but you have the presence of rapid eye movements and or sleep spindles and K complexes. So in other words, you have stage 2 and you have REM. So you have a low chin tone, you have rapid eye movements, you have Ks, you have spindles. So how do you know when to score stage R in those scenarios? So when there are segments between two K complexes, okay, two sleep spindles or a K complex and a spindle without, there's your key, without intervening rapid eye movements, then we should be going back to stage 2. Okay, so let me go over that again. Segments between two K complexes, two spindles, or K complexes and a spindle without intervening REMs. So if I have a K over here and I have a K over here, and then I do not have any kind of rapid eye movements here, then at this point I would suggest that this segment in between is probably stage 2 and not REM. So we'll talk about that in examples in a second. Another one would be segments containing REMs without K complexes or sleep spindles and the chin tone at the REM levels are considered to be stage R. So if you have segments containing rapid eye movements and there's no K complexes or spindles and the chin tone is low, then obviously it meets the criteria for R. If the majority of the epic contains a segment considered to be stage R, then stage N2, then call it stage 2. And if the majority of the epic has a segment considered to be stage R, then score it stage R. So again, these are segments when you kind of are coexisting stage 2 and stage REM. Okay. So now let's talk about the scenarios. Again, there's going to be several of these offered by the manual, and we just need to understand how it's thinking so we can apply it in real life. So in this scenario, you can see here that you have a stage wake, REM, and REM. And the question is, why did we decide to go to stage R in this particular epic? Well, in this scenario, it's because there was a chin drop, there was a loss of alpha, and there was a rapid eye movement in the epic. Even though it was in the second half, it's okay because it's rapid eye movement and the other two criteria are met. Okay, so in this situation, we would transition to stage R. Okay, even though you'll notice here the chin dropped the epic before, the presence of alpha in the occipitals overrides that, and then of course you have the slow eye movements here instead of the rapid eye movements. So even though the chin dropped early, we don't score REM here just because the chin dropped. Okay, now here's once this stage 63, okay, is this epic 63 is scored as REM. All right, then we can go back to stage 62 and rescore it. So if I'm scoring along, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, this is wake, and then I'm looking at this one, I see slow eye movements, but my alpha goes away. I would probably call that stage 1. And then the next epic I would probably call stage 1 because I don't see anything that would suggest it was transitioning to stage 2 or REM. However, when I get to stage 3, everything changes. Stage 63, then or epic 63, then everything changes because now I have the low chin tone, my eye movements are rapid eye movements, and I have the low amplitude mixed frequency in my EEG, all qualifying for REM. So then, based off the contiguous rule, I can go back and rescore this as stage R. Okay, that's because this, by this contiguous rule, I can go back to the previous epic and call it stage R, as long as it didn't meet the criteria for any other stage of sleep. So let's talk about this scenario in example C. So Once stage 73 is scored as REM, 72 can be scored because of the contiguous rule, and then of course 71 can be called REM because of the majority rule. So again, if I'm scoring this way as I'm going along, I probably would not have scored this as stage R. I wouldn't score this as R, nor would I call that R. But once I got here and realized that this was in fact R, then I have to go back and score the 72 as REM because of the contiguous rule, and then I got to score this one here because of the majority rule. And the majority rule being that we see here that the slow eye movements and the chin tone all happened in the first half and the first section of the epic, so therefore the majority rule goes back to stage of REM. Okay. So now this scenario here, once 53 is scored as REM, okay, once it's scored as REM, then 52 can go back and be called REM because of the contiguous rule, and then 51 can be scored back because of the majority rule. Again, the first half rule goes into play here. You have a K complex in the first half of this epic, 51, which suggests that the majority of the epic is now really REM. So let's go to example B. Once 64 scores REM, okay, then 63 and 62 can be also scored as REM based off the contiguous rules, right? Now 61 cannot be considered REM because of the majority rules. Why is that? Because the K complex happened in the second half of that epic, therefore keeping it as stage 2. Then of course over here in example C, we have once epic 73 is scored as REM, then 72 can go back and be called REM because of the contiguous rule, and then 71 can be called stage REM because of the precedence rule. All right, one of those rare rules that we have in there, the precedence rules. It would normally be called stage 1. So if you're scoring this direction, certainly you would have called that stage 2. You have an arousal right here. And then, of course, you would probably, because you don't have rapid eye movements and you don't have K complexes, you probably would have kept it stage 1. But now that we go a couple of X's down, the emphasis I'm trying to get here is that sometimes you have to go back 2 or 3 steps, 2 or 3 epics to rescore based off of new information. All right, another example here is that once epic 53 is scored as REM, we can go back and score 52 as the contiguous rule. All right, but 51 cannot be REM right here because the chin EMG is elevated until the second half of the epic. So we have the second half of the epic right here at stage with a higher chin tone. So therefore, we're going to continue whatever was previous, and that was stage 2. Okay, and in this example B, once 62 has been scored as N2, and the reason why it's N2 is because of the sleep spindle on the second half of that epic. Once we know that to be stage 2, then we can go back. I'm sorry, that's not an arousal, that's actually a sleep spindle. And then, because of that late spindle, then 61 is going to be N2 because of the contiguous rule. Now, again, notice that the chin tone has really dropped here, but we don't really call it REM until we get into the epic that has the concurrent rapid eye movement and no evidence of K's spindles or alpha or anything like that. So again, this particular spindle, this late spindle, kind of resets our staging to stage 2, and we don't call it REM. So don't go on the idea that if I see a chin drop, boom, it's REM. That's not the rule. You got to combine it with the other elements of the stage. So now we're going to look at this example C, where we have once 73 is scored as REM, then 72, all right, is going to also be called REM because of the majority rule, because you had an early spindle right here. It's on the first half of the epic of epic 72, so therefore I can take the majority of the rule and apply it to the REM here. And then epic 71 would certainly be stage 2, because again it goes back to the contiguous rule of the epic being stage 2, the one afterwards. And then, of course, again, don't be confused, don't be tricked by the fact that just because a chin dropped that you have to score REM. That's not the case here. You got to look for spindles, K complexes, and you need to look to see if there's concurrent eye movements. Another example here is that you can see that scored as R due to the late chin increase. Okay, so again, in the second half of this epoch, you had a chin increase. So therefore, I can still call it stage R because it happened in the second half. And then your K complex happened in the first half of that next epoch, so therefore we call it stage 2. Now, 62 is scored as N1 due to the early chin increase. So in here, a situation, here's 62, and you can see here that the chin increase happened on the first half of the epoch. So therefore, making it more like stage 1. We call it stage 1 because nothing was there to make it stage 2. There was no K complexes, there's no sleep spindles, there's nothing that would suggest that this was stage 2. So we're going to call it stage 1. Okay. Now in this scenario here, we're going to score as epoch 52 is going to be scored as stage 1 because why? What do you see there? Slow eye movements. Okay, so even though the chin tone was still low, again, don't get duped by that. Just because the chin tone was low, you had an arousal, and then you follow by slow eye movements. And those slow eye movements after the arousal now force us to call it stage 1. And now stage, example for B, epoch 62 is scored as R, okay, scored as R here, due to the fact that there was no sleep or slow eye movements after the arousal. So again, you see the rapid eye movements, so it's R. You have an arousal right here at the end of it, but there's no slow eye movements to follow the arousal. Therefore, you can call it stage R. Okay, and then of course the very next epoch you can see the chin increase, and then you have the K's in the first half, so therefore we call it stage 2. Now, once 52 here, we're talking about major body movement. So once 52 here is scored as R, then also 51 can be scored as R based off the majority rule. And what's the important to understand here is that number one, there's no alpha that happened before the major body movements, and there's no alpha after the major body movements, nor is there any slow eye movements after the major body movements. So that's why the major body movement occurs, and then we can continue to call it stage R. But if you look at this example in B, the reason why we go back and call the epoch 62 and 61 stage 1 is because of the presence of slow eye movement. See, there's still no alpha being presented on the first or before the major body movement, but there is slow eye movements after the major body movement, therefore suggesting we call it stage 1, and then we also go back and call the epoch with the major body movement stage 1 as well. Okay? Slow eye movements are so important to our scoring, and you've got to learn how to apply that. All right, so this example, once 52 is scored as N2 and 50 is a definite REM because of the low chin, the rapid eye movements, and the low amplitude mixed frequency, then basically what do we call 50? Well, 50 is going to be called, 51 is going to be called stage R because of the continuation of stage 2 rule. Okay, so there was no reason why, as we're scoring this direction, why you should interrupt the being REM. Even though you have no phasic activity of the eyes, you still have a depressed chin, still have low amplitude mixed frequency in the absence of spindles and K complexes, and then of course, then the next epoch becomes stage 2 and then continues in stage 2. Okay, and then over here you can see that 62 remains stage R. Okay, due to the late K. So the K complex did not happen in that stage until the second half. Therefore, the majority rule applies, and we call it stage R. But then 61 is applied as stage R because of the contiguous rule. So we had definite REM here, and then we called this stage REM. So what was in between now is called stage REM as R as well. So here's another scenario. So stage 50 is scored as R since the late K. Stage 53 is scored as stage R. Then 51 and 52 can be scored as R because of that. So we have this period of activity here where you have a rapid eye movement right here, all right, and then you have a rapid eye movement right here, but you only have the K complex happen in the second half of that epoch, and then nothing else occurred in 51 or 52 to say I'm stage 2 I'm stage 1, I'm stage 3. And so once it represented himself in 53, then we go back and basically sandwich them together, and we can call it all stage REM. Okay. Now, early K in 60 here in this example, and the late K in 61. So you have the early K here, the late K here. REM, a rapid eye movement, occurred in between, makes it stage R. So again, you can have K complexes, but if they're broken up by a rapid eye movement, then you can continue to call it R. In this scenario, in example C, again, you have a K complex on here, and you have a K complex right here. Okay, and so you have, because you have the chin increase in 71, then you're going to call it stage 1. So you had the rapid eye movement occur, your K complex rapid eye movement, you had an increase in the chin right here, and you had a late K, then you would call that stage 1, because you can't call it stage REM in stage 1 because the K happened in the second half, but then the very next epoch, even though you don't have any kind of K or spindle, you are going to call it a stage 2 because the K happened in the last half of that preceding epoch. And then, of course, we have this scenario here under D that you have here is a rapid eye movement here, okay, and you have a rapid eye movement here, okay. But what happened is you have a K complex here and a K complex here, but you had nothing in between here that would suggest that there was a rapid eye movement. So therefore, we're going to call it stage 2. So when you have back-to-back K complexes that are not interrupted by a rapid eye movement in between, then we're going to go back and score that as stage 2. Okay. So a lot of scenarios there, but don't get discouraged. Just understand that there is a philosophy about how they are doing this, and it goes to the majority of the rules, the first half of the epoch, second half of the epoch, and the combinations when stage 2 and REM coexist. Okay. So, definite stage R includes low amplitude mixed frequency, low chin tone, and rapid eye movements. When you have those three elements, what we call a definite stage R. So, low amplitude mixed frequency in REM does resemble stage 1 at times because there's no characteristics of stage 2 like Ks and spindles. But some individuals have more alpha in REM than they do in stage 1. So the alpha frequency is 1 to 2 hertz slower than that of wakefulness. So don't call it wake because of that, especially if you have rapid eye movements and low chin tone. Sawtooth waves or transient muzzle activity are strongly supportive of stage R, but are not required for scoring stage R. Okay. Now there are times that stage R with a low chin tone and the presence of K complexes, and then slow eye movements can occur during stage R. But the general rule here is that it just cannot follow an arousal. Okay, so slow eye movements inside of REM without a chin increase and without an arousal is fine. But slow eye movements that are combined with an increase in chin tone and a slow eye movement, an arousal would suggest that we're transitioning back to stage awaker 1. And of course, with your chin, you have segments with low chin EMG activity and a mixture of REM and sleep spindles and or K complexes usually occur during the first REM period of the night. So when are we going to see the most REM sleep that could be coexisting as stage 2? It's in the first REM cycle of the night. So here's an example of stage 2. Again, you see something very significant right here. You see a chin drop. And because the majority of the epoch is still stage 2, low amplitude mixed frequency, possible K complex or something like that, then certainly this favors stage 2, even though you had a drop. And then, of course, now we go into stage 3, and stage REM, because we have definite R here. We have the rapid eye movements, right? And we see this from the characteristics of it's got to be less than a half a second in terms of their deflection time, and then you see low amplitude mixed frequency without K complex or spindles, and then of course you have a very thin line in your chin tone, so therefore it's the lowest chin tone, so we can call that definite R. and here is definite R in a montage that includes your respiratory. So you can kind of see here, you see slow rolling eye movements are here, but you also, so this is slow rolling, but you also see the rapid eye movements here, okay, and the slow rolling here. That's all fine, all right. And then you also see your sawtooth waves, kind of a serrated look right there as well, okay.